What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Tastes Like Music. Jason and Joe here. Back with a listography. It's been a minute. The last one was The Cult. Today we are talking about XTC. This is a remastered. I did this one of my very early videos. I watched it this morning and it's not very good. I was like experimenting with a different camera too. It's like blurry and it's just not my best work. But we're gonna redo that. Some things have changed for me. Some things have moved up, some things have moved down. In that old video, I did count the Dukes of Stratosphere, who in that video I referred to as the Dukes of the Stratosphere, and approximately 400 people let me know that that was wrong and that I don't know what I'm talking about. But I do know these records pretty well, all the XTC stuff. This was a pretty easy redo for me. All right, they've got 12 studio albums for us to rank. You have any past experience with them? I could see you going either way on XTC because on one hand, I think they are kind of precursors to a lot of Britpop. They also have like a lot of Beatles pop and power pop influence. On the other hand, they kind of come from the post-punk world a little bit as well. So I don't know how you're going to feel about XTC. I guess we shall see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna blow the surprise here. I don't think I've mentioned them ever, except for on the Songs of the Year 1986, which I included Dear God. And I mean, they didn't factor into my 1980s deep dive, the 82 deep dive, the 84 deep dive. So I don't know. We'll see. See if I like them or not. The bottom for me, Go To, which is the classic Sophomore Slump album. It was the last album with the original keyboardist Barry Andrews, who left the group after trying to take over the group. He invited Colin Moulding and drummer Terry Chambers out for drinks and excluded Andy Partridge and kind of wanted to take over the band, I guess, and he failed, and then he left. This is the only album, I believe, that has written contributions from him as well. Two songs on the album. They're not great. Nothing on this album is very good, I don't think. I don't know if they just didn't quite know what direction they were going on after the first album, but it just feels like a lesser version of that mostly. The most interesting thing about the first two albums, I think, are the way it kind of brings in post-punk and then also pub rock for really, it's only these first two albums, and it's pretty much just because of the keys from Barry Andrews. Like he's got a very like Elvis Costello-y sounding keyboard style, and it just has an odd way of integrating into the music. It doesn't quite work. Andy Partridge's songs, they're not quite there yet. He wrote one or two good singles, but for the most part, I think he's still trying to flesh out what he's doing. I don't really like Colin Moulding's herky-jerky post-punk stuff. And I mean, Mechanic Dancing at least kind of has a hint of that classic Andy Partridge chorus. But Battery Brides, Big Black Hole in the second spot, and there's just not a lot of interesting, catchy, memorable songs here, and it just feels like them not knowing what to do and trying to recreate the magic of the first album, but just not being able to do it.
Not a total surprise at all. Um, if you saw my first video, this won't be a total surprise either. Although, the top comment in the last video was me saying the in Dukes of the Stratosphere. The second most commented thing was that people turned it off after seeing that I had oranges and lemons last, and I still do. I had it at 2.5 stars. I'm up to 3 stars on it, but it's still my least favorite. It's a double album. It's their second double album. And I think there are some really good songs here. Mayor of Simpleton, I think, is a terrific pop song. But I do not like the production on this very much at all. I think for a band that has most of their output occurring in the 80s, they did a great job of like avoiding most of the pitfalls of 80s production. But to me, this has a very unappealing 80s-ness to it. And for it being so inspired by the 60s, like they don't do anything to take those sounds and utilize them. Um, like this is just like 60s melodies with 80s production. And to me, it feels almost like a youth group performance of psychedelic rock. It just feels so neutered, and I hate the way the backing vocals sound. I don't like the way the bass sounds on this record. I don't know. People say I always overemphasize the importance of production, and I I truly, truly do not believe that I do. I think usually the songs are way more important to me than production, but this is a case where the production is just so off-putting to me that it makes it hard to enjoy the songs that much. Yeah, something about it just hits my ears wrong. It just feels a little off to me.
I don't know if I ever saw your original video because I really hadn't listened to XTC that much and I had no reason to go back, but that is shocking. Very shocking, especially considering how lousy a couple of these albums are. Go to, I have it 2.5 stars, by the way. My 11, I'm going to go with an album from 1983 called Mummer, and I think it's kind of boring, kind of lousy. This is after English settlement when the band became a studio-only outfit. Partridge had a nervous breakdown, and drummer Terry Chambers quit after a few songs because he liked touring. The band didn't want to tour anymore. There's only studio. They would never tour again, I guess, which is interesting. But I don't know. There's something, I don't know, boring. It's very pastoral, and it's kind of a continuation of English settlement. It's verdant and green, and there's just something missing. I don't think the songs are very good. I don't think Steve Nye, who worked with Japan on Tin Drum, was a good producer for the sound. Um, there's a lot of just like noodling around, just not very many hooks. You have a song like Beating of Hearts is it's just like all these noises and all this like stuff being piled on. It's like Middle Eastern sounding at times. There's like nothing underneath the noises. Wonderland has some cool noises in it. Like there's some 80s-ness to it, some odd guitar, some tinkling keys. And it's just kind of on this chassis of nothingness. And for a band that's started to be so good at writing pop songs and catchy melodies and everything, there's just I don't know, nothing underpinning these noises. I don't really like Love on a Farm Boy's Wages other than the acoustic guitar sound. And they didn't have a single. The label wanted a single. They got Bob Sargent to come in and find a suitable single. And I don't know. He made one good song, which is great, Fire, the highlight of the album for me. But it's sleepy, and Partridge just overstocks the cabinet here with these little idiosyncrasies that I think muddle the final result. And I'll quote Robert Christgau, as I always do. The eccentric dissonances that sour Partridge's melodies and the fitful time shifts that undercut his groove may well bespeak his own sense of distance, but art poppers who command both melody and groove are rare enough that I wish he'd find another way. I don't know what that means exactly, but he gave the album a B minus, and he wasn't so hot on it. So I agree there exactly with what Robert Christgau said. It's just kind of lacking. 3 stars.
Okay, I think we are going to have very, very different lists here. Um, my number 11 is Apple Venus Volume 1. And so, Oranges and Lemons, I think It's got some good songs, but not good production. And this has good production and a lack of good songs. I think it sounds cool. There's a lot of strings and orchestral elements, very earthy, which is a welcome uh, thing coming after the era of my least favorite production of theirs. I like Green Man. I'd like that. Those are the two standouts for me. But beyond that, not much in the way of strong songs. And I think your dictionary kind of stinks. Maybe some of the worst, clunkiest lyrics that Andy Partridge ever wrote. Plus, there's also a lack of good Colin Moulding songs. He only gets two songs on this record, and they are two of the weaker songs he ever wrote. So, yeah, it's okay. I like the sound of it, but that's about it. So, also at 3 stars.
Well, that is my number 10, so we're not totally off base. I think, well, we're waiting 7 years for this, and this is all we get. I mean, it's not bad, and I like Jason, like the production and the way it sounds. But these songs are just stankers. Like there's nothing interesting going on, and they had their conflict with Virgin, the label, um, after they squashed the third single from Nonsuch, Wrapped in Gray. And then they were gonna make Partridge was gonna make an album of like 70s bubblegum pop that had like really sort of like explicit 70 or explicit sexual lyrics. And he played them for the label and they just like hated it. They totally didn't take. So basically Virgin just sat on their contract for 5 years and then 97 they were freed. So this is their comeback. It's mostly just Partridge and Moulding, and mostly just Partridge. Guitarist Dave Gregory left the band after a couple songs or something because he didn't like the direction and you know other reasons, I guess. Partridge, known for not being a easy guy to work with, and he called this his Orcustic album, which is orchestral and acoustic. It's the portmanteau. Has a 40-piece symphony and it's lush, and the strings I think are decent. The orchestral parts are all right. There's just no good songs here. Like all these songs, like Mummer, just missing an engine, missing a transmission. It's a car without all the pieces in it, and yeah, I just think it's not that uh, good to listen. It's interesting direction. But yeah, they should have written some songs in those 7 years.
My number 10 is a record that I saw a lot of people really enjoying in the Discord. It's Nonsuch, 1992. And it seems like it's like a nice dark horse pick for people. It doesn't get a ton of praise. It's not considered like their best, but I think fans like to really champion this one. And I don't know, for me, it's pretty comparable to Oranges and Lemons. I think the production on it from Gus Dudgeon, famously Elton John's producer, is not very good. The drums are incredibly loud, especially the snare. It's so blaring. The piano sounds stink, really synthetic sounding. And I don't know what happened after Skylarking, but from that point on, their backing vocals I find very annoying. So yeah, I just don't like the sound of it that much. I don't think it has as many strong melodies as the tracks on Oranges and Lemons, but the good ones here I think are better than the good ones there. I think there's a couple really excellent songs. Dear Madam Barnum is great, Then She Appeared is great, and My Bird Performs is one of my favorite XTC songs, period. So it's got a couple tracks that I would cherry pick, but it is way over long and there's way too few good songs and I don't like the sound of it. So, yep, 3 stars for that as well.
You're right, we are going to have very different lists. My number 9 is their latest album, from 2001, was it? 2000? Wasp Star, Apple Venus 2, which is kind of a counterpart to Apple Venus Volume 1. Except for this time, they wrote songs. And I guess these are songs that they wrote from 94 to 96 or whatever. And I think that was a fertile time for them coming after Non Such. So at least they have some good songs here. This is the electric stuff, rock and pop and folky, even a little blues in there, focused. The orchestras, I think there's some strings on some stuff, but it's not recorded with a 40-piece symphony, for sure. Sounds more like XTC, feels more like XTC. It's got the jumpy bass lines, the politely loud guitars, the intertwining vocal harmonies, the backing vocals, all that stuff. It feels like a logical step after Non-Such, but with some of the major label stuff turned down. This was released on Cooking Vinyl and Idea. I forget. I don't know which one was first or what that means, but it was a more independent label. So, they can dial things back a little bit. They don't have to worry about singles so much. And you have some interesting turns from Colin Moulding here. He's long given up the post-punk dream. In Another Life has some nice harmonica. It's light on its feet, boarded up. Really like a folk song, which is cool. And they do some bluesy stuff, Wounded Horse. They do some kind of funky white boy stuff with You in the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful. The Wheel and the Maypole, classic upbeat XTC. And it sounds good. It's not a classic album, I think, by any means, and it's certainly not as good as, their best stuff, but I think it's a step below that, a fine final album and a good good way to leave the world of XTC with a good taste in your mouth. So I'll go up to 3.5 stars for that one.
Okay, that is my number nine, and it's definitely my favorite post-Skylarking record. I like the guitar tones; they're a little like thicker and gauzier sounding than usual XTC guitar tones. Kind of cool. In the old video, I had this 4 spots higher at number five, and went back and I couldn't believe I had it that high. And I said something like all the songs are good except for like two of them. And I kind of understand that because they have like good melodies, like good power pop melodies, but I don't I like it still has this sort of like same problem that everything after Skylarking has, where they're like these Beatle-esque melodies and but something is amiss and it feels, like power pop often, doesn't do well critically. And I, as a big power pop fan, often struggle to understand that, but this must be what everyone hears when they listen to other power pop. It just, to me, feels so empty and like hollow and like melody only. And even though the melodies are good, there's just something that is not connecting for me. I don't like the way the vocals sound and the backing vocals. That's still a problem on this record. But yeah, there's some decent stuff here. Playground's okay. Stupidly Happy. Man Who Murdered Love, probably the best song on it. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't feel as substantial as like the classic run of XTC records to me.
Perhaps those are the eccentric dissonances that sour Partridge's melodies that Chris Gow was talking about.
I, I'm I think it's the lack of any dissonances. It's all too major key and too fluffy and yeah.
Hmm, interesting. All right, number eight, The Big Express from 1984. I think I upgraded it a half star for my first listen, which I didn't find much to like about it at first, but it grew on me slightly. Slightly. It's still kind of annoying. And I don't know what happened after English Settlement, but the band kind of lost their way for a little bit. I think it was a lack of just like a strong producer maybe to reel them in. This one, it's got a little of that like early dissonance and jumpiness to it on the opener Wake Up. It does sound almost not aggressively 80s production, but kind of stereotypical more so than any of their other albums. This one is the most mid 80s. When people say 80s production, this is kind of what they're thinking of. Just like overdone with some of those like cheesy synth sounds and like the Linn drums and stuff like that. The Emu emulator, all that stuff is used on here. And I think it just takes away from their uniqueness a little bit. All You Pretty Girls, just the band at its most annoying kind of style I thought they had left behind, but for whatever reason decided to bring it back. It has a fine verse, and then that chorus just sucks. It's just super cloying. Shake You Donkey Up, another one that has like a decent verse, but has this just terrible chorus, just annoying, like in your face with the like cheekiness, just doesn't work for me. Seagull Screaming Kisser Kisser is one of my favorite song titles ever. It's a fantastic song title. Um, Best song on the album as well. And it just has a cool sound to it. They do some stuff like the kazoo that opens the everyday story of a small town is kind of cool, but it feels overstuffed. There's just like all this stuff adding on top of these melodies. And the melodies are strong enough almost to hold all the extra stuff going on, but I still think it's just too much going on. The choruses feel kind of half-baked. A lot of times they're just like the song title over and over again. The songs at least are brighter and more upbeat, more energetic than Mummer, but it kind of suffers from the same fate as Mummer's. These songs just aren't super memorable. And I feel like they needed like a tyrant to come in and whip them into shape and just get the best out of them, maybe in like 1986. But who? Who would do such a thing? Find out later. Find out later.
All right, well, that's my number eight. The Big Express, often derided, and I don't entirely disagree with it being derided because I mean, I only have it number eight, but I think it's maybe a little overly hated, and I think perhaps that is because hating this record or thinking that this is one of their worst records kind of adds to the narrative of skylarking and, Todd swooping in and like saving them when they were at their lowest. But I don't think this is them at their lowest. I think there's, plenty of decent stuff here. They do feel a little like maybe stuck in neutral or like not quite sure which direction to take. The record got good reviews at the time, though, actually. It didn't perform super well, which is why Todd ended up being brought in. But critically, critics like this record. I think I Bought Myself a Lyrebird is a great highlight. Wake Up opening the record is also very cool. Reminds me a bit of Adrian Belew on that one. I like All You Pretty Girls. I think it's catchy. But beyond that, it's hard to find a ton to say about this record. Like, it doesn't have a strong identity of its own among the XTC catalog. Like, it doesn't have the really interesting production of Mummer or Skylarking. It's not angular post-punk like the early stuff. It's not a double album like English Settlement. It doesn't have like a bunch of standout tracks like Black Sea does. It's just kind of like all of their albums averaged together into like a soup of XTC. It sounds like XTC, but it doesn't rise above any of their best work. And yeah, I think, Todd, when he talks about like how his approach to producing them, because this was the record right before he came in, he listened to it and the main thing that he diagnosed was that there was just too much going on and like too much sound happening, like every single space was filled and there was no air in it. And I definitely think he has a point there, especially listening to a lot of these records in a row. The drums are a lot to take. Hugh Padgham was their engineer for a while and he produced a record, and these gated reverb drums are just exhausting after a while. And you add on top of that a bunch of other arrangement elements. It's just a tiring discography to listen to. If you listen to one record, it might not bother you, but yeah, listening and binging a bunch of XTC is not the easiest thing to do. And this might be the prime example of that. But all in all, not a bad record. 3.5, a light 3.5 for me on that one.
All right, number seven, we'll go back to the debut with White Music from 1978. An interesting sound. It's got some post-punk, some punk, some art rock, some Beatlesy stuff. Also a little pub rock, really. Just the first two albums that comes into play. I think the lead single, the first song on the album, Radios in Motion, kind of has all of those things. It's like little Roxy music, Elvis Costello, Talking Heads, whoever else you want to cram in there, into a very catchy little single. It's kind of itchy, squiggly, skin crawling post-punk quirkiness. And it's not my favorite style, but it's definitely an interesting sound. The Partridge songs I like. The Moulding songs, he's just a little too herky-jerky, a little too dissonant for my taste. It's the aural equivalent to like being lost in a maze. It's just kind of you're going one direction and there's no like end point that you ever get to. The third song, This Is Pop, I think is another promising Partridge number. Kind of splits the middle between Radios in Motion and the kind of of cross wires. Do What You Do all over the place. I almost hear some like ska or like two-tone stuff on there. Like it's just very bouncy. Statue of Liberty, more like pub rock. You get those keyboards that just really make me think of Costello and like Graham Parker and stuff like that. The big problem with this album, of course, is All Along the Watchtower, the cover that should not be, especially the length of it, 5 minutes and 40 seconds, right in the middle. I hate it. I just hate it so very much. I think the idea of doing it in that manner is a good idea. Like it's a cool idea, but it's so like loosey-goosey and kind of just it misses the plot completely of the song, and it just feels like a piss take to me. A little tighter arrangement, I think it could have been cool. And side two's good, a little less catchy. The Colin Moulding, I'll Set Myself on Fire. Eh, don't love it. I really don't love Colin Moulding that much in general. It's sometimes nice to get a break from the Partridge stuff, but usually it's the songs that I'm least interested in are his. And he's a good bass player, though. Very strong bass throughout this album. Very funky in kind of an unfunky British way. Um, Thunks and clunks. And is very noticeable and cuts through the guitars and keys well. He's an interesting bass player. I dig him. Just wish he wouldn't write songs. So 3.5 stars for me for White Music. Nah, it's cool, but I don't think I would really listen to the whole thing.
Okay, my number seven is Go To. Maybe a tiny bit of a sophomore slump, like you said, but I love mechanic dancing or whatever it is. But yeah, that's a great one for me. And that chorus or post chorus or whatever you want to call it when he says "Can't wait until the weekend comes," that is like the first classic Andy Partridge chorus. The way he goes down on the last note of that part of the melody is just like his signature move. And yeah, it's essentially this record is like repeating the formula or trying to repeat the formula of the debut. It's not really too different from the debut, but the energy is just like slightly muted here compared to the first record, not quite as exuberant sounding. And it just feels like they could have had a little bit more time to work up more A material. I think this record only came out like 9 months or something after the debut. And, there's nothing really bad on this record, but it does to some extent feel like the tracks that didn't make the first record. So Yeah, it's not bad, but compared to the obviously better first record, it's just a step down.
Okay, this one might be controversial. I don't really know how people like normal XTC fans feel about discography and how they'd rank them, but I got Drums and Wires at number six. First album with Dave Gregory, who joins as a guitarist, replacing what's his face, the keyboardist that nobody remembers. And I like his style. I like him. I think he's underrated. Not really sure what he plays compared to Partridge, but I think they have a very good guitar sound throughout their discography. So I'm going to give some credit to Gregory for that. I like Drums and Wires, and I really like it in spots. And then I really don't like it in spots. It's one of those. It's the main problem I have with XTC is just the consistency from songs to song just doesn't live up to what they could be in my mind. I always feel like Partridge is like so up his own ass that it just doesn't. He veers off into this strange territory when he could be just like maximizing these tunes. It's a little long. It loses momentum towards the end. But it starts off fantastic with Making Plans for Nigel, which is just a awesome song. Such a cool guitar like tone. The backing vocals are like totally unique. The like bird call kind of oh like it's just really interesting backing vocals. And I like the way that they almost are a whole different instrument. Like they're not just the backing vocals. It like adds a whole new layer to the song, which is very cool. I like 10 feet tall, a little softer, very melodic, a little jangle in there. The arpeggios on the acoustic are great. Feels like a college rock song before college rock existed. You have like the quirky Talking Heads, Roxy Music stuff. When you're near me, I have difficulty, which is okay. I really don't like Complicated Game, though. It's kind of part and parcel. I don't like these early XTC albums as much. Just the level of repetition and the harsh vocals don't really work for me. And for all the tunes that I do like, there's tunes that just repeat the same tricks, and the level of repetition with the lyrics and the choruses, something like Life Begins at the Hop, it just starts to drag when the chorus is just like a repeat of the title over and over. You got this janky little guitar part. Roads Girdle the Globe has some great bass playing, but I don't know, the vocal melody I find a little annoying. Outside World sounds like The Clash. There's a nice horn solo in that is the way. Overall, just too many songs I don't like in between the songs that I really think are great. You got the gated reverb making really, I don't know if it's its first appearance, but Hugh Padgham was an engineer on here. Steve Lillywhite, the producer, and I think he does a good job for the most part. Not overwhelming, not like overly Steve Lillywhite, I don't think. And yeah, it's a cool album. Some really cool songs. And Colin Moulding's Finest Hour with Making Plans for Nigel, but it's just too many songs I just never want to hear again on here for me to get to 4 stars, but it's a high 3.5.
All right, for me, this is where it gets tough. I think the top six are all very good. But for at number six for me is going to be English Settlement, which did make my top 25 in our 1982 deep dive video, produced by Hugh Padgham. He's, I guess, promoted from engineer on the previous few records. This kicks off like their pastoral era in a lot of ways. And, it's more complex arrangements. Andy Partridge is like looking for any excuse to not have to play shows and tour anymore. So he's like trying to make the songs too difficult to play live. In his mind, that would mean that they can't play live. Um, I don't entirely get that though. Like I don't hear a ton of songs on here that where I'm like couldn't pull that off live. Um, but it is a little bit more elaborate and layered than their previous records, especially like their use of acoustic guitars and layering those in. The reason that this is my least favorite of their very good albums, I think there's just I don't know, there's like a goodness to almost all of it, but like it only in a few spots really elevates to greatness for me. Senses Working Overtime, of course, probably their most well-known song outside of Dear God, at least in the US. No Thugs in Our House is great. Jason and the Argonauts, Yacht Dance. And those tracks are all like pretty front-loaded too. So I like Snowman a lot, the closer, but there's like a stretch where I wouldn't even go as far as to say it's filler stretch, but it's just like a stretch of good songs that don't quite elevate for me. I don't entirely think needs to be a double album. I think it could have been cut down. As much as I enjoy all the tracks, I think a more concise track list would have aided the record as a whole. So, yeah, it's 4 stars for me. I like it a good bit, but yeah, I think their other ones are a little punchier, a little tighter, a little more concise.
It is my number five, so I'm right there with you. I never quite got to 4 stars with this. I was at 4 stars during my listen, and then kind of you get to that second half, and it's right down to the edge. I got it 7.9, which is zero point 0.1 away from 4 stars, but I can't do it. I like the sound of it. I love side one and side two, and just side three and side four pretty much pointless to me. I think it absolutely should have been a single album. I think there's no reason for it to be 72 minutes long. And the lack of editing, the self-editing for XTC is probably my biggest complaint with the band. Like if they tightened up some of these albums, you add half a star to basically their whole catalog. And I think this one in particular suffers from that. I like the sound. It's very pastoral. It's very lush and verdant and green, and it's a very cool sound to have in the 80s because it sort of prevents them from becoming too 80s sounding with all the acoustic guitars and all this other stuff that they're doing. Um, it's very organic, which is a rarity in the 1980s. This is a calmer album, leisurely at times. You got the lusher, folkier instrumentation, the herky jerkiness, really almost completely gone at this point. They're writing catchier, prettier, more hook-filled tunes for the most part. Senses Working Overtime's obviously great, just in the Argonauts, cool. Maybe a little Police lineage in there. All of a sudden, it's like a jangle pop song, which is cool. No Thugs in Our House, a little pubby almost, and maybe bringing back that Elvis Costello sound. Um, and yeah, and then you get songs like Melt the Guns, which I do not like, and that long expanse of a second half just brings it down for me. I really love the first half of it, but yeah, no reason for it to be a double album in my mind.
Number 5 for me is the debut White Music. Angular guitars, punk urgency, nervous energy, strong pop hooks. Also, like you said, there are 4-piece here with Barry Andrews on keys. The first half, especially, I think is really awesome. Radios in Motion is a fantastic opener. The ooh-ah-oohs in the chorus feel like they're setting the template for Supergrass's I Should Coco. I like my XTC with a little grit to it, and so like these early albums work pretty well for me. I think, after Skylarking, the edges get a little too sanded down. Everything's a little too smooth. So maybe I'm a little higher on the early stuff than a lot of people, but yeah, I think they are good at this sound, and unlike a lot of post-punk stuff that I don't quite jive with, I think they bring these hooks that makes it way more palatable, way more enjoyable. A really good track list here. This is Pop is great. Statue of Liberty, I love. Spinning Top is strong. And yeah, I think these are pop songs that go toe to toe with their contemporaries. Maybe they don't like differentiate themselves enough, and maybe that's why people hold up their later work as being stronger. I think you could, compare this record to a lot of other bands at the time, especially like Squeeze comes to mind with all the keyboards on the first two records. But for the lack of originality, I think they make up for with enthusiasm and energy and good hooks. So I think it's a really strong record. 4 stars.
All right, my number four, I'm gonna go with Black Sea from 1980, which during the deep dive I only had it 3.5 stars. I'll bump it up to four because I think it's a pretty good album. I think it's a nice balance between their earlier, you know, herky-jerky, angular, talking heads, squeeze, whatever influence you want to talk about, and the more mature, poppier, more melodic stuff. And to me, it's just a little too quirky sometimes still, but it's the needle is going in the right direction. It's almost to the classic Partridge melodies and choruses. You have, respectable street generals and majors, which definitely have, that forward-looking, almost college rock feel to them. Very catchy, very, power pop stuff. But then you also have, the extraneous fluff, like another Cuba, Love at First Sight. Still some of that like noise for noise sake, repetitive choruses, repetitive verses don't quite work. No Language in Our Lungs is a nice crunchy guitar part that I like. Rocket from a Bottle, I think, is the perfect mix of the cork and that, up-tempo, momentum-filled, you know, melodic gem that has a cool guitar part and a catchy melody and a good beat. Sort of all of their strengths kind of consolidating in one song finally. Same with Sergeant Rock. It's another good one. They have a little punk in them still with like Paper and Iron, Notes and Coins. Um, and there's a lot of cool sounds on the album. I dig the harmonica on Smokeless Zone. Doesn't really sound like anything else I've heard. And but there's just a bunch of songs I don't want to hear, and I really dislike Travels in Nihilion, whatever the last 9 minute song, whatever it is, 8 minutes, 7 minutes. I think it kind of ends the album sort of with a bad taste, kind of a dud there. And I know people love like, especially like Pitchfork loves like this era, like 80 to or 79 to 82, I guess. Um, but to me, it's just not quite there on a songwriting level all the time. There's just too many throwaways and things I would consider filler. Maybe they have a point to them, but I don't love them. So it's another album with some really high highs and some lows that just make me not want to listen to it that much. But I do think it's good enough to be 4 stars.
My number four is Mummer, 1983. This is the first album following their retirement from touring. A seemingly divisive record in their catalogs. Fans seem to be kind of split on this one. It's definitely weird, definitely kind of an outlier, but I think I come down on the side of it being very good. It places you in its own world with this like unique atmosphere going on. It's pastoral and acoustic, but augmented with just enough touches of keyboards that it keeps it from getting too folky. Songwriting wise, I think there's some very strong material. I love Love on a Farm Boy's Wages, one of my favorite XTC songs. Colin Moulding's Wonderland is great, a really otherworldly song. And then Ladybird, In Loving Memory of a Name, Me and the Wind, and Funk Papa Roll is a really strong run of tunes at the end of the record. David Gregory has said that he felt like Steve Nye was a bad fit for them because he came from working with Japan, which was like a keyboard and synth-based band, and they were more of a guitar-based band, and he didn't think it was a good match. But in a way, I think it works because it's like XTC is like, okay, we're gonna make like this acoustic record, we're gonna do our thing, and then Steve Nye is like this safety net of keeping it from getting like too folky, too acoustic, too boring. And he puts just enough of this like synthetic texture on it that makes it really interesting and unique to me. I don't think there's too many records that sound like this one. So yeah, I'm a fan. 4 stars for me.
I'll probably have it in the same number one, but obviously our number three and two are way different. My number three is Oranges and Lemons from 1989. And you say that it has bad production. I just, I don't know. You hate the late 80s, I guess, for production. I did not notice for 1 second a bad sound, a bad mix. Maybe some janky like 80s synth and keyboard sounds every once in a while, but to me these songs are just almost all very good. You got the power pop, you got the college rock, the jangle pop, some sophistopop popping up here on songs like King for a Day. Mayor of Simpleton, obviously, just a fantastic, catchy power pop number. I like, you don't like the drums, but I think the drums are cool here. I think Skeleton steps out with its like samba beat, with the drums very prominent in the mix. I think sounds really cool. I like the female R&B style backing vocals there. Hold Me My Daddy is like, well, now we know where Vampire Weekend stole all their ideas from. I didn't realize how close to a Vampire Weekend that song sounds, which is cool. Like I like hearing where stuff comes from, and I was not aware of Oranges and Lemons before this deep dive, so always interesting to hear that. It's definitely more aggressive and louder than Skylarking. Uh, the way the band attacks each song, it's just aggressive, and I think that works. It's not quite as pretty, but I think all the hooks here are great. I think it's more American sounding, I guess, is what I would say. Um, and I know it's what a double album, but to me it felt much shorter and with much better momentum than English Settlement. And you could probably knock, 10, 15 minutes off this album and it'd be fine, but it doesn't torpedo, the length doesn't torpedo my overall feeling towards this one. So I'm up to a mid 4 stars for Oranges and Lemons.
All right, my number 3 is Black Sea. Also, just talked about this one in our 1980 deep dive video. This continues what Drums and Wires was doing with an even bigger sound. The drums on this are just like pounding, which is both awesome and, as mentioned before, a little tiring. This record comes out of the gate really hot, Respectable Street, Generals and Majors, Living Through Another Cuba, Love at First Sight. It's just like bam, 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 bam. I think it loses a tiny bit of steam as it goes through, but there's some other good songs mixed in as well, like No Language in Our Lungs and Burning with Optimism's Flames. I like those tracks quite a bit. It takes the early angular post-punky thing, and now it's like starting to feel like they have a sound of their own. I think they have an identifiable sound at this point. Overall, a pretty good collection of songs. The highlights are really high for me, which I think, catapults it up my list of my favorite records of theirs, despite the fact that some of the production is a little exhausting to listen to. But there's no denying like the energy behind some of these tracks. 4 stars still.
My number two, it's obviously not Skylarking, so it's got to be Non-Such, which was your least favorite, which is wild to me, or second least favorite, or whatever it was. Whatever it was, that doesn't matter. It was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong then. It's wrong now. I really like this album. I listened to these all out of order because I'd heard most of them at some point. So I actually started with Non-Such, and I just really liked it right off the bat. I like the psychedelic. I like the sophistopop. I like the jangle, the college rock, the power pop. All these elements kind of come together. And it's kind of crazy that this album is as good as it is because Gus Dudgeon really hadn't produced a good album since Elton John in like 75. Um, so that's kind of wild that he produces this. And I know you don't like the production, but to me, no problems here. Dave Maddox from Fairport Convention plays drums, which is interesting, and kicks off with Earworm that is Peter Pumpkinhead. I love that one. I like the deep lyrics about religious persecution and stuff. I think that's pretty cool, paired with the catchiness of it. My Bird performs, great harmonies, cool vocal arrangements, a little jazziness in there. Dear Madam Barnum reminds me of like McCartney stuff. Smart Monkeys sounds like it's kind of transported from the 80s as this MIDI synth solo that's completely out of time. Love the vocals. I love the vocals on this album. The fact that you don't like the backing vocals now is wild to me. I love the way they're intertwined and um, just all the backing vocals pretty much throughout their career. I think is good. You got that faux country stomp of Crocodile, some really great guitar work. Rook is very sophisticated. I think it dips a little in the middle with like War Dance, just sort of trying too hard to be profound. But I love Wrapped in Gray. I love the strings, great melody, great vocals. Um, Ugly Underneath, very chamber pop sounding. I think is great. And there's even like a cool guitar solo on this album, Books Are Burning, which is one of these things that's like, wow, they had that in their pocket and they never broke it out before. Like, show off some of that guitar once in a while if you're going to be that cool with it. I like how political the album is with Peter Pumpkinhead, Wrapped in Gray, War Dance. And I think it's very just interesting and deep and also brings the hooks. And I think it's very good. It's a high 4 stars. I'm not quite ready to commit to 4.5, but it's up there.
Number two for me is Drums and Wires. I like this record a lot. David Gregory replaces Barry Andrews, and for me, this is where the XTC sound really comes into its own. The interplay between David Gregory's guitar and Andy Partridge's guitar and Colin Moulding's bass, that the interesting parts that they each write and kind of build on top of each other, the way they twist around each other and become kind of like this one singular part. To me, that's the XTC sound. That's really what I'm looking for from them, and they rarely ever did it better than they do on this record. You've got Steve Lillywhite producing and Hugh Padgham engineering the first time that they're on an XTC record. And I've talked a lot about kind of like the harshness of the sound of all these gated drums. And it's kind of, I mean, they're sort of using that sound here, but it's a little less exaggerated. And I think this is by far the best sounding XTC record. I think it sounds fantastic. They keep their knack for great openers. Making Plans for Nigel is incredible, one of the best songs of the era. I love Colin Moulding's bass playing on the track Helicopter. And I think on this album, they figure out how to do slow tempos and still stay interesting. They kind of toyed around with doing some slower stuff on Go 2, and the tracks kind of just ended up a little boring. But here on like Day In, Day Out and Complicated Game, they're able to kind of vary up their sound a little, do a slower tune, a quieter tune, and still remain interesting. Yeah, like I said, the album's really well recorded. The guitar tone on 10 Feet Tall, I think, is incredible, and the way they blend in acoustics on it works really well as well. A lot more nuance to this record. I think everything's really well executed. I think the songs are great. It's a 4.5 star album for me.
Well, number one, gotta be Skylarking, 1986. I think people know about this one enough. Todd Rundgren comes in, kind of whips everybody into shape a little bit. Just everything about this album works. The way it all kind of runs together in, thematically very similar. I don't know, it's not really a concept album so much, but just like the little interludes and the little insects buzzing around and the pastoral nature, it just feels very lush and un-1980s, right in the middle of the 1980s. And I think that's super important for its legacy and the way people still feel about it today. Todd adds things, it's got some melodica, and there's an Eastern sounding scales and instruments on Opener Summer's Cauldron. Like you get these little stream effects that blend grass and the meeting place, which are two of Colin Moulding's numbers. I think probably his best work since Drums and Wires on this album. Um, I think it's like just enough to break up like the more sugary up-tempo Andy Partridge stuff. I think the way that the two songwriters and the way it's sequenced by Todd, I think really works. Just clever lyrics, fun lyrics. That's really super. Supergirl is great. Ballad for a Rainy Day is immaculate. I love the key sounds. The bridge is to die for. The transition to 1000 Umbrellas is perfect. I mean, everything just works. Mermaid Smiled has a little jazziness to it. The only problem I have with this album would be the non-inclusion of Dear God. And without Dear God, it's a 4.5 star album for me. So I don't know if it's officially going to be a 4.5 star album, or if we can just pretend Dear God, which was supposed to be on the album from the beginning, really, is included. And then it's an obvious 5-star album because it is a perfect song in my mind and comes at the perfect time in the album to lift it up after, you get three Colin Moulding tracks on side two. Maybe that's one Colin Moulding track too much. The two last songs on the original album are Colin Moulding, which is okay, but like I need Dear God in there before that to like lift things up and give you that like just perfect pop tune. Um, but I don't know, it's little quibbles. I think the album is just great, and just the way it all is so cohesive and pastoral, and all the little things that Todd Rundgren did to like just coax the best out of both of them really is apparent here. And yeah, it's their best, obviously.
Yeah, I think some hardcore XTC fans will make arguments for other records like English Settlement or Black Sea, but I don't think there's much of an argument to be had. Yeah, it's pretty obviously their best, I think. And a lot is made about Todd's involvement in the production, and the production is really strong without a doubt. All the like little things he did to connect the tracks with the buzzing insects and the mechanical pistons or whatever you're hearing, you know, tying all the tracks together and the kind of like cyclical song cycle concept thing, I think works really well. But, you know, Todd did, cherry pick from all the demos and stuff and say these are the songs that we're going to do. So he did have his hand in it, but, independent of Todd, the songwriting I think is just light years above anything they ever did before. Every song is super catchy, very memorable. Every song is unique and different from the other tracks on the record. It's just, head and shoulders the best collection of songs. And that's really all it comes down to. Todd's productions, cherry on top. I've like waffled on this between 4.5 and 5. My one major gripe isn't the exclusion of Dear God, but it's the man who sailed around his soul might be my least favorite XTC song. I do not like it at all. So it's kind of a blemish, and it like, I've always said that a record doesn't have to be like literally perfect to be 5 stars. Some people take that stance. I think you can have one or two lesser tracks if everything else is amazing. But really not liking a song is kind of trickier. But yeah, I am gonna bump it up to 5 right now, from where I had it at 4.5. I basically moved like 8 or 9 of these records up a half star from where I had them. Yeah, 5 stars. One song that I don't like, but everything else is pretty perfect. The other interesting thing I noticed, not that anyone watching this video will care about this at all, but I noticed Sacrificial Bonfire. I never noticed before, but the little guitar thing in that track, Rogue Wave, totally nicked it for the track. I think it's Christians in Black, if anyone's interested in listening to that, but they just totally ripped that little guitar lick off and made a song out of it.
Somebody gets sued for that. You just cost Rogue Wave their future.
Sorry, guys. All right, so damn, have we disagreed on a number one since Cram left? We
Ugh,
might have.
I hope so, but maybe not.
Yeah, a lot of disagreement, but coming together at the number one. Overall, where are you landing? It's hard to even tell where you are now on XTC. You like XTC?
I like XTC. I like them significantly more than I did. And I think the albums that I hadn't heard, the later ones, Origins Lemons, Nonsuch, the Apple Venus ones, definitely elevated them overall. I guess it was just bad luck, I guess, that, 84 Big Express, wasn't that great. I listened to Mummer in the past, and was okay with that era, but like the later era is the era for me. So that definitely bumped him up, and I'd expect Oranges and Lemons and Nonsuch to make my top 25s in their respective years. So.
All right, we'll take that as a win then. Let us know what you think of our list. Drop your own list in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and check the video description. You can follow us all kinds of places, social media stuff. We've got a record label you could check out. We put a record out earlier this year. We also have merch and a Patreon if you'd like to support us in another way. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.